You know what? I just feel like I wish that I could make sure that this whole podcast displays. People who know me in reality know that I'm a complete goofball. So that is one thing I want translated out here. Maybe we're all just going to have like a group meetup one day where we can go wrap some houses or something. That was just stupid, Mom. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of Bless Your Heart podcast. I'm your host, Laura Hartnett, and on today's episode, we're going to be talking about the motherhood mindset. So motherhood mindset, what does that even mean? Basically, if anybody has been mothering for a while, or hey, maybe you're out there and you're pregnant, let me tell you, it is a whole mindset that you have to have whenever you're a mother. I think that that's the reason why so many people say it completely changes you once you become a mom. And that's very true. And I feel like it changes you so much for the better because there is so much love that is just put in your heart. Your heart becomes like 10 sizes bigger, and it's just filled up with this love that you have for this little thing and this little person that's absolutely adorable. And just looking at them, you're just like, man, like things that I have done for my kids, I would have never done if I didn't have children. Like I just wouldn't have had the courage, the strength, all the virtues. Like it really has made me a more virtuous woman being a mother. And that's because I had so much love. Like they say, love can move mountains, and things I've had to do in order to take care of my kids. Like I look back and go, oh my gosh, like how on earth did I do that? But you know what? Here I am. And it was during like the early years whenever they were younger, because keep in mind, whenever I said my kids' ages, my oldest was actually 5 when my 5th was born. Like she was turning 6 in a few days. So I had basically 5 in less than 6 years. But, you know, that in and of itself was just like, blah, like my brain was just all over the place. Talk about brain fog and mixed with pregnancy brain. Honestly, it's a miracle that all of us survived that stage, because I mean, each of them were in a different age, a different stage, somewhat similar, but also, you know, they're changing so much and so rapidly during those early stages. I remember the first year of life. And if you're in that first year of life, just understand that you are going through the most rapid changes of anyone's life right now. So it's not always going to be at this pace. It's going to change and evolve, and there's going to be a series of like, okay, now you can catch your breath moments. Like I feel like once they hit 5 years old, also like there was a little bit of a catch your breath moment. Like that was whenever they could go and make cereal for themselves in the morning, and I could actually maybe sleep in just a little bit on Saturday. That is if we didn't have a t-ball tournament or something to go to. But I mean, I feel like during that time, like it was insane. At that point, I was a stay-at-home mom because, you know, how on earth am I going to work and have the energy to work or the ability to? And that many kids in daycare would have been an astronomical price, and I was a hairdresser. So how could I even afford to work at that point? It was more cost effective if I stayed home. So I spent those years just doing a ton of researching. You know, I think everybody in their life wants to do better than kind of like how they feel like they were raised. I think that's just evolution. I think that's just you wanting to always grow and learn and do better. And it's like, oh, when I'm a mom, I'm not going to do this, you know? And then I think it's also funny because I look back and there's so many things that I would remember being so mad at my mom about and being like, when I'm a mom, I'm not going to do that. And then I look back and I'm going, oh my gosh, I get it now. I get why she did that. And, you know, in some moments, I'm hoping that my kids will do that to me too, because, you know, I'm at the angry, somewhat teenager phase, and they're not, don't get me wrong, they're not like angry bad kids or anything like that. But, you know, like sometimes you don't feel very appreciated, and sometimes you're just kind of like, you know, okay, well, I guess I'm just doing what's expected, but it would be nice to feel a little appreciated, you know, from time to time. And they do, you know, like there's moments of it, and I relish in those moments. And then when they're younger, yeah, they don't even know what's going on. So you'll get like a little hug in here, but it's because they need it, And there was a moment when I was in my closet and I was crying, and my daughter came up and she went like this and, put her hands, like helping get my hair out of my face. And she was like, "It's okay, mommy." And honestly, that was a definitive moment in my life. Like, that was a time where I was changing so rapidly. Another little detail about my life was I met my ex-husband in college. However, I was a freshman and he was going to graduate school. So he was 7 years older than me. And I was only 20 years old when we got married. And I was only 21 whenever I had my first child. So I then had my second child at 22, my third at 24. And so, I had my kids, not only many of them, I also had them super young. So I was also juggling, just trying to learn how to be an adult at the same time that I was learning how to raise children. So, it's one thing to take care of yourself. It's another thing to take care of another human being. And so going from a very, my parents, I was raised really happily and, privileged to a certain degree. I didn't have like a maid or anything like that, but I'm just saying, like, I was raised comfortably. And so I didn't have many things that I really wanted that I didn't have, No, we didn't have yachts and boats and stuff like that, but we had just a strong, healthy family. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom, so I was raised in a great way. And so, I wanted to be like that for my family. And so going from still somewhat being coddled to now I'm a mom and I better like whip this into gear. That was a really hard transition, and I needed a lot of support. And I think that's originally whenever me and my ex really started having a lot of our issues, and things really did change because it brought out sides of me that I didn't even know existed, and that I look back and just go, man, yeah, that wasn't my best self. And honestly, we didn't have a strong foundation because we only dated, for a couple years even before we got married. I think we were married less than 2 years from when we started dating. Yeah, now that I look back at it. And so, being that young, you can see that I had a lot to learn, and not the best decision. My teenage daughter often reminds me of that. Like, that was just stupid, Mom. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Like, I wasn't in the best way. That was not the smartest decision of my life and the most educatedly made decision. So I have very much tried to make up for that after the fact by trying to educate myself as much as possible. But going back to kind of the mindset of motherhood, because I wanted to do, really well by my kids, and, being in the hospital, I remember them handing me this baby and just going like, this baby can't even hold its head up. Like, how on earth am I going to get this baby to like take the SATs? Like, this feels impossible. Like, and they're giving me this task, and I'm the mother. Like, it all of a sudden just hit me, and I was just so much fear, and it just caused me to just go, I don't know what I'm doing. And when she started turning like 2, keep in mind also, like, I never even babysat. I was not really around kids. I was the youngest of my family, and it was just me and my brother. And so this whole thing was totally new to me. So I was like, I have to learn about this. So I started reading a lot of books, like parenting books, and just kind of like trying to figure some stuff out. And I remember one of the books, it had like a telecounseling service, and I called it and just said, I'm just kind of curious to know like what this is about. And it's a woman who was she was a childhood development specialist. So she knew all about the cognitive levels and ages and stages of children. And so I would meet with her over the phone once a week, and we would just discuss for an hour at a time, where my kids were at, what they needed, and she would suggest books for me to read, and then we would discuss it afterwards on our next session. And she just really helped me navigate, not from just like a whim, because like I said, I didn't have much experience except for my own perspective. And I think like it's good to like parent from a perspective at some point, but maybe you've been in a situation where you weren't parented well, like, and you feel like, man, that wasn't the healthiest. And you might start noticing yourself start to, do what you said you wouldn't do. Like, and it's almost like you go into this autopilot, especially when you're exhausted from being a mom. And you are all of a sudden hearing your mother's voice or your father's voice or whoever really shaped you. And you're like, oh my gosh, I'm my mother, or I'm my father, or I'm this person who shaped me. And maybe you wanted it to look different. So, I mean, this is a blank slate. Like, the only thing that you have, is your own perspective. So you can shape that though. Like, you can basically create this child, all these negative habits that you don't want to pass on to your child. Here's your opportunity. And I took that very seriously because I was like, this is an opportunity for this kid to be raised really well. So I need to learn. I want to learn about this. And so at that time, it was during the stage where you didn't have like digital downloads and all of that yet. So this was, 18 years ago. So I would just go to Mardell and, I think Amazon at the time. Yeah, Amazon had some, but I would just get audio CDs, and I would, of these audiobooks, and I would just listen to books in the car whenever I was driving, or, I would read books too. If I really liked the book I was listening to, I would also buy the book on Amazon and just highlight and kind of like, come up with stuff. I would also, like I said, talk with her. I'm not saying everybody needs somebody who's like a developmental specialist that you have to talk to, but it just really helps me. If you really are having a lot of anxiety about parenting, then definitely, there are people that you can reach out to. You talk to your pediatrician, get online and just look at like, parenting coaches and things like that. Look at their credentials, make sure that they're qualified, and that this isn't just something that they learned from, just their own experience. But I mean, like really understanding like the developmental stages of each stage helped me know how much to expect out of my child, and also how much grace to give as well. And not only to my child, but to myself. Like, there's so many times where I didn't even realize, like, I'm over here projecting a lot of the things that were my issues onto my child. Like, they would have like a meltdown, and I'm like, oh my gosh, they're going to end up, just with depression and anxiety and all this stuff, and I'm kind of like, okay, that's definitely just a fear I have. They don't, just because they're crying because they're 2 years old and it's the terrible twos that, by the way, I did not know existed, does not mean that they're going to end up, in rehab or something. Like, it's just totally normal. So understanding that there are things you can do to really set your own expectation of your child for yourself, but also for yourself, so that like you're parenting to the best of their ability and yours. So it also brought to the surface, I always talk about how, I started in the parenting section at the bookstore and I ended up in the self-help because it really brought about, like, if I can't model this or I can't be this, then how on earth am I going to teach this? So that's whenever I really started making some changes as to certain parts of my personality that I really wanted to work on. Like, I was a little bit of a more quick-tempered, and so certain things would trigger me. And it was because I come to find out that I'm what they call an HSP, a highly sensitive person. I didn't know that about myself. I didn't know, like, I knew I was sensitive, but I mean, I'm also a girl. Like, I feel like, I just was more following a gender role. And that's not necessarily true, actually. Like, chemistry wise, my brain chemistry is a little bit different. Like, if you write and respond to me in an email that even seems a little curt, like, I really like rethink that and get stuck on that for days. I mean, even as a child, like, I was such a people pleaser and tried so hard that, because my mom always taught me, like, there was a little bit of an enmeshment growing up of etiquette and people pleasing. And I thought that that was what was expected. That was an etiquette, and not realizing that that was actually more of a boundary issue. So I had to really learn how to establish better boundaries. I didn't even know what boundaries were. I never even heard of that word. And let me tell you, that is one thing that if you learn anything on this whole entire planet, boundaries. I have used the understanding of boundaries, and there's a whole series, by the way, by Henry Cloud, Townsend and Cloud. They came out with a book, a whole series called Boundaries. They have just the boundaries, which has a red marker or a red pin. Then they have boundaries with kids that has a little yellow crown on it. They have boundaries with teens that has a green crown on it. They have boundaries for leaders in the workforce. They have boundaries in dating, boundaries in marriage, beyond boundaries. I mean, there's so many. I really wish, by the way, I would give anything if they could do boundaries in divorce, because that is where I have really struggled, because I've relied so much on these books that I'm kind of wait, hold on. Now I need someone to hold my hand through this divorce thing, because there's so many boundaries in co-parenting that I'm trying to figure out. Because one thing I did learn, and this is another just kind of side note, but whenever you're going through a divorce too, right now I'm reading boundaries with teens, because I'm some of these things, I don't know, is this behavior a result of the divorce, or is it just normal adolescent, teenage, development? And so not knowing that has caused me so much anxiety, and has caused me then to get triggered and to get angry and quick tempered, that I started realizing I'm not showing up again as my best self. I need to educate myself again. So the mindset of momming and motherhood is that, when you don't know something, it's okay, but just educate yourself and find, ways to educate yourself. And if you really are overwhelmed, then find somebody to talk to about that. I'm a huge advocate of calling people. I used to call the authors of these books, okay? When there was a time where I was wondering whether or not I was, being emotionally abused and things like that, I read a book about it, and I was still a little bit well, I mean, that's such a broad and overgeneralized, statement. Some of the statements that were made, I was I don't want to be dramatic, so I called the author. And I was hey, I need to kind of tell you more specifically my situation and my, stories that I've had. And then can you tell me, what you think, So, I mean, I would call into some of these book authors had radio shows, and I would call into their radio shows and ask them questions. I mean, I've always been very curious in nature, and I have always been I need to figure this out. I want to find answers to these questions and solutions to these problems. So, motherhood has in this culture been minimized as being natural. And if you're feeling defeated because you're this is supposed to be natural and I don't feel good at it, no. I many times, even to this day, I will still have moments, I mean, where my kids and I'm confused and I don't know what to do, and they're acting a certain way, and it's because kind of find out there's a developmental stage that I missed and I wasn't paying attention to. And I was oh my gosh, boom, smack me in the face. I don't handle it well because I'm thinking I'm also trying to juggle stuff at the salon, and all of a sudden I'm over here feeling like the worst mom on the planet. I'm crying on the phone with my mother and saying, can you just remind me of who I am? I mean, I think that's a hard part about being a single mom is, I don't have my partner there to tell me differently and to say, honey, I've watched you. You're doing an amazing job, and supporting me and backing me up. If anything, I think what's really hard about my situation right now is that, our divorce was not amicable by any means. And so there's almost a opposite narrative where if anytime I am making a mistake, it's almost capitalized on, it feels like. And so I actually have the opposite of support. And so I have to go out now, and I've learned I have to seek that. I have to have a group of women who know me and moms who know me. And so when I talk to them about it, that they can, support me in ways that I used to wish a partner could. So, make sure you have a strong support system in motherhood as well. Maybe if your partner is gone a lot, or maybe they're just a temperament that is less of a listener, or, I know all of us, and that's one thing I've learned from being with moms, is some people have husbands that are a little bit more patient, and some people, they don't want to talk about that with their husbands. They want to talk about it more with their girlfriends and things like that. Whatever it is your situation is, make sure you have a strong support system, because you're going to need it. Life can get really tough, and life can get really messy. And there's going to be moments where you really need somebody to just be on your side and to remind you, or gently tell you, like, yeah, this isn't been your best. I was really grateful for my daughter, my 17-year-old. She so kindly gave me constructive criticism, and the way that she delivered it made me so proud, because I was just like, wow, you did that so gracefully. And I'm a very sensitive person. And so for her to deliver, that kind of message, like, it doesn't take much for me to be sad or feel like defeated. That's my toxic trait. Okay. That is my toxic trait. Like, if you want to just beat me down, I have a hard time with criticism, and that is not because I think I'm so great. It's just, I have to process a lot. Like, being an HSP, like, you have to, a little bit of criticism, it just brings about all these questions in your mind, and you have to process so many things. So it kind of gets a little overwhelming at first. So I am a big believer that, constructive criticism is so helpful and so useful. It took me a while to get comfortable with it, and I had to almost just like boot camp, like dive into it. It got so much so that I was anxious about criticism that I actually got on and created a Threads account where I was like voicing my opinion and being a lot more open about my opinion, so that I could get some harsher feedback so I could practice. Because I was like, these aren't even people I know, and I could, kind of deal with it a little bit better, some of the criticism and things like that. So I was like, okay, I just need to practice this. I need to practice like the mindset of like, when I get criticized, like, this does not mean that I'm a terrible person and all these bad things, or is it even true, And then through learning that, I could also teach that to my daughter, who's very sensitive as well. I think she gets a lot of that from me. And I think I have, a son who is also a little bit more on that side of it. So I'm like, oh, this is good. Because now because I learned it, I can teach them this. So I think it's just really important for you to understand you're going to mess up. You're going to make mistakes. That doesn't mean that your kids are ruined for life. But, whenever you are having a hard time, as long as you kind of set a standard for yourself of going and seeking help when you need it, don't talk yourself out of that. Like, don't talk yourself into thinking you're crazy, and don't talk yourself out of thinking you might need help from time to time. So make sure you arm yourself with resources, and always have one to reach out to. That is the biggest hope that helped me, is there was ever a question about anything. Like, I never read a book in my life whenever I was younger. Like, I never read, ever. I was not the person that was like, oh my gosh, yes, I loved it. Like, the movie was good, but the book was better. That was not me, okay? And I still have people who come in and be like, but did you read the book? And I'm like, gosh, I wanted to be one of those people. I think that those types of people are just so well educated, and they just sound so, I don't know, superior in some way. Like, and I always was like, I wish I was that person, but I'm not that person. But whenever it comes to nonfiction books, that's where I have a few merit badges for that, because I feel like it wasn't a matter of like, oh, I'm so smart. It was a matter of, yeah, I knew so little. So I had to learn a lot. And I didn't just make an excuse for myself and say, oh, wow, like it's just hard. Life is hard. Well, it is. So you know what? Yeah, that's the motherhood mindset you have to have is life is hard. But you know what? Like if you don't learn things and you don't teach your kids, then you're going to start passing along generational trauma. That's where it starts. But if you take it upon yourself, and we're in the information age. I mean, this was before really we had smartphones whenever I was doing the early years. And yet there was still so much information at my fingertips. Now, oh my gosh. Probably right now, I mean, maybe the issue is whether or not there's too much information and there's how do you sift through to know what to follow. But if I could tell you, like the parenting program that I really followed was Love and Logic. I'm a huge fan of Love and Logic. I don't spank. I didn't have to. With all 5 kids, and believe me, I had all sorts of personalities in there. I had all sorts of strong-mindedness. If like what you heard about me is my strong-willed nature, my children inherited that trait. So I even had to deal with a lot of that. But I even watch how they think, and just watching my daughter, how she articulated, to me, my flaws. I think it was because, she was taught how to think. And Love and Logic, that's a gift. Like she wasn't taught how to respond. She was taught how to think for herself. And I think that's what I believe discipline should be for kids is the word discipline means to teach. And so it's not about just, oh, I can't handle this. I'm mad at you. Stop talking. Sit over there. Be quiet. It's about what do you want your child to learn? Like self-control. Okay, well then how do I teach them self-control? And these books were all about natural consequences. And I listened to the audio and stuff like that. There's actually probably if you look it up, there's places that even have courses that they teach, like at churches, at schools, preschools, and things like that. They still have in-person classes that you can take where they teach the Love and Logic method. And I think because, for me personally, you always heard that whole spare the rod, spoil the child. And I'll just tell you one thing, I learned so much biblically about how that's just one big misunderstood thing. And that it's I heard people take pride in how they spank their kids. And you know what? If you spank your kids and they turned out great, well, good for you. I'm not, saying you're a bad mom. I'm just saying I feel like there is, good or bad. I feel like there's also good and better. And I feel like for me, the best way was the Love and Logic way because it teaches them how to take responsibility for their actions and how to solve the problem that now lies in front of them because of that. And if you start teaching your kids accountability, then whenever they have a problem in their life, because they learned at a young age how to take accountability, that's going to help them in their relationships. That's going to help them just throughout all sorts of things in their life, in their job. And it starts, basically teaching them slowly how to establish boundaries. And, them taking, being more autonomous. There's just gifts on gifts on gifts. And instead of them just basically also just because of a fear that's put up, they fear having to take on this accountability. Therefore, they start adjusting their behavior themselves, because it creates this whole snowball effect for them that they're going to have to clean up. So they might start, adjusting their behavior a little bit. But if it's oh, I get, spanked, it's okay, well now you're the only thing that's enforcing this thing. So when they're not around you, how's that enforced? And also when they're in the classroom, they can't, you don't give permission to the teachers to spank your kids. So it's now this kid doesn't get the same consistent, discipline because they know, well, this person can't do this, So it's not a consistent method in my opinion either. So, feel free to send me all the feedback that you want, but I'll be honest with you. I'm just going to take it and throw it out because I firmly believe that it's just not necessary to do. And so if you want more, about that, the love and logic way, the boundaries with kids, there's a whole bunch of books that are also cited in a lot of these books, and that which you learn about, where you can start seeing other books talk about the similar way. I think Kevin Leman has A New Kid by Friday. That's a great book too that I read, which kind of is the same principle. And so I just basically started listening to all of those to where it really just set the message in my brain very solid about the subject. And so that is kind of, that's the mindset. That is the motherhood mindset. Educate and educate after you procreate. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, for more information on any of that, or if you have any questions about the resources that I used, I'll be, citing them from, here and there, throughout all of these podcasts. But if you want to know a little bit more about some of the people or places that I've used and learned from, then feel free to reach out to me. You can connect with me on Instagram at Bless Your Heart Podcast, or you can get on my website and also find my information there as well. So I look forward to hearing from you. And we're going to be talking about all sorts of other things on episode 3. Until then, I hope you have a good one, and we'll see you then. All right, bye-bye.
1, 2, 3.